Welcome to Ascend's Aviation 2020 video interview. This week I'd like to introduce our Director of Consultancy, Eddie Pienzek. Eddie, given all the financial turmoil in recent months, has there been a let-off in the order books or the pace of deliveries?
Well, all the indications are that the order boom is well and truly over. The market is changing, although you wouldn't expect to see the headline figures showing that. So far this year we've had about 1,600 aircraft orders, but the vast majority, about 1,100 of them, occurred in the first half of this year. We then had another 300 orders announced during the Farnborough Air Show in July, but since then it's been effectively deadly quiet. We've had 40 orders placed in August, about another 80 in September, and we've probably had at least about another 50 or so far in October. So it has slowed down, and the orders are slowing down. As far as the cancellations are concerned, I think a lot of people are expecting airlines to cancel orders. We haven't had too many of those. We've had about 60 aircraft orders cancelled. And that's really as we would have expected to see. You see, the airlines need modern fuel-efficient aircraft for the future if they're going to meet the fuel price challenge, the emissions, and just have better reliability and technical issues with the aircraft. But they don't need some of those aircraft right now. They have other issues to contend with. So what we're seeing is airlines actually deferring some of their order positions. And the deferrals have been measured in their hundreds so far. Quite a lot of the manufacturers, Airbus and Boeing in particular, they have been handling a lot of these deferrals. We do tend to get some feedback from them. At the moment the feedback is fairly grey and opaque. I think a lot of the orders are still being rearranged, a lot of the positions and the delivery schedules are still up for grabs. So it's a very unclear picture, but we can fairly reasonably safely say that we've had many hundreds of aircraft having their delivery schedules changed.
Airlines have been cutting capacity quite drastically in response to the current crisis. Can you summarise where we are to date with fleet cuts and what Ascend expects over the coming months?
Well, the fleet cuts and the actual cutback in fleet profiles for the airlines began in June of this year. United Airlines announced that they were standing down 100 aeroplanes, the majority of them 737s. And since then a whole swathe of other carriers have joined in. The grand total so far of announced cutbacks is about 1,080 aeroplanes. And that's about 5% of the world's fleet. So the airlines are really stepping down that capacity issue. Now where it's happening is actually quite interesting. North America, they're standing down perhaps 10% of their fleet. Asia is standing down 3%, or Europe about the same amount. The Middle East isn't stepping down many aircraft at all, and the Middle East seems to be on a slightly different strategic curve at the moment. In terms of numbers, about 600 narrow bodies are being stood down. That's about 6% of the narrow body fleet in total. Another 200 RJs, and that's about 6% of the RJ population as well. As far as the seats taken out of the marketplace is concerned, that's only about 4%. And that tends to suggest that the wide body fleets are not as heavily impacted. So it's the long haul routes, Trans-Pacific, Europe to Asia, Asia to the Middle East to Europe. Those are the kind of routes that are still holding up reasonably well, and where the wide bodies are being required.
You said in Ascend's recent webcast that desperate times calls for desperate measures. Can you expand on this?
Well, yes, and that's really referring back to the airlines. The airlines need to preserve cash. The airlines need to maintain their own cash flows. Most of them have spent the last few years becoming very lean and mean, stripping out a lot of the excess fat on their infrastructures. But in these times they really are struggling to find more ways to make ends meet. And one of the few places that they think they can still go is back to the lessors. And I think we've already seen quite a few airlines already approaching lessors, asking for their understanding and support. And I guess that's a euphemism for a rental holiday or rental scalebacks in terms of aircraft lease rates. So the lessors have a predicament on their hands. They need to try to maintain the aircraft flying, but they also need to understand that the airlines require a bit of support. And there's a number of ways that the lessors can approach this. They can roll over and just agree to the airline's demands. They could actually get a bit more aggressive with it. They could go legal. But I guess the best way forward for the lessors and lessees is to find a solution together. Now, the last time the airlines looked for lease rental cuts back in 2001, 2 and 3, we saw some of the headline lease rates for aircraft types like the A320 and the 737 fall by, say, 50%. Now, some of those rentals have actually come back, and in the case of the new Gen 737, back to practically where they were 5, 6, 7 years ago. For other aircraft types, especially those that are more vulnerable to these kind of situations, you have a different picture. For example, the MD-80 fell in lease rate from about 140,000 a month down to about 40,000 a month. And from there it never recovered, and it's really being phased out of the marketplace today. So I think there's a little bit of innovation needed today. I think the lessors and the lessees need to think differently. They need to work together, act laterally, and perhaps find some new innovative solutions to work their way through what are pretty challenging times.